speaking of simulators, so I play a lot of Kerbal Space Program. I don't know if you're aware of this game.
Yeah, I mean, I played it maybe like 7 years ago or something for a little bit with my son.
Awesome. How far did you guys make it, if I can ask?
I did make it to the moon eventually, yeah.
Okay, nice. So you have experience. Even though you haven't been to space, you have experience.
I didn't get back from the moon, no.
Hey guys, so I got invited to the Canadian Space Agency to talk about the Artemis 2 mission and talk to the astronauts, meet Jeremy Hansen, meet the backup Jenny Gibbons. We're tasting some astronaut food. We're gonna learn about some health. We're gonna learn about some exercise, all about the Artemis 2 mission, so come along. I would just like to give a huge shout out to the Canadian Space Agency for inviting me to take part of this media day. It was a crazy day. There was tons of media, but it was so much fun, so thanks so much. Hey guys, we are currently on our way to go check out the Canadarm3 and also try out some VR and like be aboard the Gateway, the Lunar Gateway. So this should be kind of cool.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Space Agency. Bienvenue à l'Agence spatiale canadienne. My name is Ken Podwalski. I'm a program manager for the Gateway program for Canada. With me, Jeremy Hansen and Jenny Gibbons. We're here to talk to you today about our contribution to Gateway. Our contribution to Gateway is going to be a space robotics system, a Canadarm3. Why are we talking to you from this place? Well, as a good example, you get to see what we've done previously on the International Space Station. You cannot build a platform in space without a robotic system to maintain it, take care of it, assemble it, and do everything you need to be able to do that platform. Going to the moon is going to be a significant endeavor with a Gateway small space station orbiting the moon. It was an absolute need. So the reason Canada is part of Gateway is because Canada must be part of Gateway. We have to be there. Space robotics are a part of that. Canada owns space robotics and we are the leaders in it. And what we're going to do with Canadarm3 is even make ourselves that much more the leaders in space robotics.
Just to give you a kind of a sense of the challenge, you're all aware that humans have gone back to the moon before, but this time we're going back with a different mindset, a mindset of bringing along our commercial, international partners, setting up an infrastructure that allows us to do science on the moon, to push humanity, but to develop technologies to eventually take us to Mars. Everything we're doing right now, we always at the back of our head, we're using a filter of how do we leverage this opportunity to help us get humans to Mars in the future. That's a very different mindset, and it requires a different infrastructure and a different approach. And the mindset that we're going to stay. You know, we're not just going to do a few missions to the moon and then that's it. This time, it's more like the International Space Station, where we're going back to the moon with the intention that we will always be doing science on the moon and always leveraging the moon to go deeper into space. So that is a big change.
Hey guys, so we are just about to do this VR experience where you get to be put on these VR glasses and it's like as if you're in the Lunar Gateway. And they told me that they use this so that engineers and stuff can kind of collaborate over long distances and they can kind of all jump into the VR thing together and then they can point out very specific things.
So it's hard to tell what I'm looking at, but it's this 3D to-scale model of the Lunar Gateway with the Canadarm, doing its thing. And it's just incredible to be there. Like in VR, you can actually get a sense of the scale of this. And like, I think the guy told me the solar panels are 40 meters tall, which it's just when you're there, you're just like, oh my God, this is so huge. I realize I look like a complete moron here just looking around, but trust me guys, this was such a cool experience. And to think that like people are actually using this and figuring out problems, it's just so innovative and cool.
Hey guys, right now we are where all the astronauts are training and we are going to check out exactly what they do on the Artemis 2 mission, how they're going to stay in shape up there, and also maybe the Lunar Gateway. Let's check it out.
So because they're in space with microgravity, I'm sure you guys all know this, but you lose bone density, you lose muscle mass, because you don't really have to lose your muscles. You lose cardiovascular kind of activity because your body doesn't have to pump up anymore. Like there's no gravity to fight against. So there's all these issues that you have to deal with when you're in deep space. And so this is like a flywheel kind of device, and it's solving a couple different problems. So number one, it doesn't require any electricity or power to use, which is important. Number two, it's kind of small and contained because honestly, the Orion spacecraft is so small. It's like a van, basically. It's like a minivan with 4 people living inside it. So if somebody's exercising, like it's going to be tight in there. And number three, the movements of the craft. They don't know how it's going to affect kind of the different movements that, somebody doing these movements for like 30 minutes, is that going to affect the craft in any way? So all of these issues, they've thought of it, and the Artemis 2 mission is going to be where they try it out. Next up, they took us to a simulated medical bay where they're doing research on deep space medicine.
As Annie mentioned, when we're on the International Space Station, our frame of mind is different, and it will be looking further afield in deep space missions in the future. So to prepare to go to the International Space Station now, we take Chief Medical Officer training. There is a Chief Medical Officer for every International Space Station mission, and we are reliant on working with the ground to treat medical conditions. I would say that if there is an issue on the International Space Station, of course, we have that medical officer and we have a medical kit to keep us healthy, but we are focused on prevention, and if anything really did happen, you could return to Earth within a day. So we always have that lifeline Earth nearby that we can return and get the care that we need if some situation should arise where we need to get off the space station. But now I want to reframe our minds when we're thinking about the future challenges that we're going to be facing when we keep people healthy in space. We're talking not 400 kilometers above the surface of the Earth like the International Space Station, but 1,000 times further than that, going back to the moon. And then even further, we're thinking 1,000 times further than that, going to Mars. So we're definitely going to reframe the way we think about prevention, keeping people healthy and safe, what we need to be chief medical officers to get ready for those deep space missions.
Next up, we talked about food and nutrition, and we actually got to sample some of the food items that they're going to be taking on the Artemis 2 mission, so pretty cool.
So a lot of the products, because they have to be shelf stable, will be dehydrated. So we see one product here. This is a shrimp curry. That's one of the Canadian products that we're flying. So basically, it doesn't look that appetizing when it's dehydrated, but there are shrimps, curry, and rice in there, and then and then you're going to add water and heat it if need be, and then it'll look a lot better and taste a lot better after that.
Natalie said something that is very interesting to us as a crew, and that's the fact that we don't have warm water. We have only this ambient water. And on Artemis 1, and we flew the vehicle with no crew, it's also missing most of the life support aspects. We didn't have any water on board Artemis 1. The tanks were empty. And so we have actually no idea what temperature that water is going to be coming out at. It may be lukewarm, it may be quite cold. We doubt it'll be hot at all, but we really don't know. So we'll find out on the mission. So when we did our food tastings as a crew, we actually asked them to prepare it cold, like just ambient temperature, so we could get an idea, because some of them rehydrate reasonably well at ambient temperature, and others, they're really good when they're warm. They're not so good when they're not warm. We're flying, one tube of maple syrup for the crew, and that's just really like an emergency pick-me-up. If the food is just getting a little bland on day 8 and it needs a little something, we have a tube of maple syrup. And that also, just for my crewmates, if they're also looking for that little pick-me-up, they'll be like, oh, thanks, Canada. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a big contribution, the maple products.
Potentially being in that rocket, depending on how the launch countdown goes, maybe 4 to 5 hours before we launch. And then we will have been up before that, suited for a while before that. Then we get into space. We have an hour and a half on the first orbit to do some, really quick checkouts of the vehicle, make sure we're good to go for a day. That's a very busy hour and a half. Then we go for a day, and then right away we get into some manual piloting and docking demonstrations and tests we need to do while we're close to our upper stage. So that all has to happen in day 1. And so we don't anticipate really being able to rehydrate food, warm food. And so we're looking at things that we can just open a package and have a bite while we're actually working and just keep going. And so this is one of the items that I chose for that reason, that I know I can just grab it and eat and get some decent calories without any preparation.
We are about to try some space food. This is apparently some of the stuff that's going to be actually on the Artemis 2 from the Canadian selection. So let's try some space food. First thing we're tasting is a shrimp curry. Looks pretty good. And a lunar module. Okay, here we go, shrimp curry. Shrimp Thai curry. It's actually pretty good. It's better than camping. It's better than dehydrated camping food, by far. I could eat that I could be on the moon eating that. Okay, next up we have some salmon. It smells pretty good. Smoked salmon. I love smoked salmon. Smoked salmon was very good. It almost just tastes like normal smoked salmon, but like chunkier. Okay, we have now the Canadian classic.
It's just the lighting is better and the backdrop is better.
I mean, they said no crumbles, but we got this classic maple cookie. Apparently, the commander has requested the maple cookies, so you know that they're going to be good. One of my personal favorites. Definitely crumbly. Definitely. I can see this getting in the instruments, but you know what? Is it worth it? I think it might be. This just tastes like your standard maple cookie.
What would you like to?
But with vanilla cream. Vanilla cream instead of maple cream, but pretty good, pretty good.
After I sampled all the food, which is actually not bad, by the way, but then again, I do a lot of backpacking in the backcountry, so it is very similar to those kind of foods. So, you know, once you get used to it, it's actually not bad. The shrimp curry, though, it was pretty good. Ambient temperature-wise, that's how I had it, so maybe how they're going to have it. Not bad. I think they add a lot of spice and stuff to those, because it's like, when you have it in the ambient temperature, it just makes it taste so much better. Anyways, coming up now is the media kind of did like a scrum afterwards, which is basically one of those things where all the media stands around and then just fires questions. So I chose the best questions. I also got to ask a question, which is really cool. So here that is.
Right. So we recently delayed the mission to September 2025. I'm very proud of this decision. I feel strongly it was the right decision. And the reason is, there are many small reasons, but on Artemis 1, one example is the heat shield. We looked at the heat shield when it came back, and it didn't look like we predicted. It did work. If there had been crew on that mission, they would have been totally fine. But it wasn't what we expected. And so we learned something we didn't know before. And now we're doing some experiments to try to understand that phenomenon better, so we can ensure that the case is bounded, that it couldn't get, maybe we got lucky on Artemis 1, and it could have been worse. And this is what we need to understand. And so our whole program is about mitigating risks. We will take many risks on an Artemis 2 mission, Artemis 3, all the missions. But when you have a risk that you know that you could do something to mitigate it, that you could take some time and learn something on the ground before you go, that is the right thing to do. And it takes courage to delay a mission because there's a lot of external pressure to go on time. But the right thing to do is to delay the mission, have the courage to do that, and I'm pretty proud of the leadership that they took that decision.
Jenny, can you maybe just explain? So when Jeremy's in the capsule, what like you're going to be on the ground, like troubleshooting, you're going to be helping them out. Can you explain a little bit of what happens once he goes up?
Absolutely.
Because your job doesn't end like.
No, I continue to hopefully support Jeremy and the rest of the crew when they are around the Earth and then eventually around the Moon. So I'm going to be acting as a Capcom, which is short for Capsule Communicator. That's a role that you've encountered often, even if you don't know it before, because it's the voice from mission control that goes up to the crews. We've had capsule communicators from the Apollo missions all the way to ISS. We often act as communicators for our friends who are on the International Space Station every day. But I'll be a Capcom for Jeremy, so working through his daily plan, helping test all of the equipment that they're working on before they do the lunar flyby, and acting as the link between the incredibly talented ground team, that enormous team that's supporting the Artemis mission, and the link to the crew that's going to be in space. So I'll follow all of the training, be fully qualified if a situation arises where I would need to contribute in a different way. But once launch happens, I'm going to be there supporting from mission control all the way through splashdown and recovery. So I know it'll be an amazing opportunity for me, like to be able to personally support a friend and crew members in that way. I think will just be a highlight of my career.
This is good, friend.
Knowing what you guys know about the Orion spacecraft and space travel, how comfortable would you be in the lunar service module for the Apollo missions compared to now? And how much risk do you think they took compared to what you guys are taking?
Oh, that's a great question. And I've never really thought of it that way. It feels like the risks are very similar. And I would be equally comfortable in that program as this one. There are some major differences. Technology has obviously changed since the Apollo vehicles were designed and built. We've incorporated a lot more automation and leveraged computers. We have a lot more precision. You probably know this, but Apollo was very, very limited in that they could only get to the equatorial region of the moon. And so they couldn't do what we're doing today with that design.
And so we've obviously taken what we've learned, technology, we've improved that design. Of course, we have a lot of work to do to make it operational and get it working, but so those are the differences, but the overall risks, they're very similar, what they did and what we'll do going forward. However, I say that because I have the most admiration for that group of people. I think what they did during that time was nothing short of extraordinary. It surely was. It's amazing what was done. And not just the astronauts, I mean the team, basically a country mobilized, and others were brought along too, right? I'm sure you all know the story. We built the legs for the lunar lander here in Canada. Many of our brilliant engineers left Canada and went to work on the space program. There are Canadian fingerprints all over the Apollo accomplishments during that era. And but now I think we're much more front and center. They were probably unsung heroes in the Apollo program, and now Canada is very much front and center as a partner in the missions to go back to the moon this time.
I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just add, I think that was a fantastic question, and I just want to emphasize something Jeremy did mention, which is the team. So as far as we're talking about our comfort with the risk that we would be accepting in a program like Apollo versus Artemis, I just want to emphasize that the preparation for those missions, the teams that you're working with, you are being taught about the capsule and the procedures by the people who actually developed them. You're working with geologists who have spent their entire life studying the lunar surface and are telling you what is most helpful for them to receive if you're the eyes on the lunar. Like, if you look around, what should you be describing that is most helpful to the hundreds of thousands of scientists on the ground? You have that training. So I would say that, of course, there are differences in the program. Maybe there's a similar level of risk. We're doing something very different now. But the essential component that we have, which is the training that we receive from the ground team, I would imagine is similar and is just phenomenal.
And last but not least, my interviews with Jeremy and Jenny. We didn't get that much time, so I only got a few questions, but here they are.
How does one get involved in turbulent flame physics and pollutant reduction in combustion systems, and also flame effects and microgravity? How did you steer into that?
Oh my gosh, yeah, you start small. I probably wouldn't have known, I'm sure I wouldn't have known about all of that, and I didn't think that was something that was in my trajectory when I was in high school or even when I started university. So if we go back like to the early ages, I really loved being outside. I really loved science. Like, learning new things was really great for me. And I loved being creative. I loved to like paint and make crafts when you're little. I always loved that. And the combination of science and being creative for me ended up later on, I found out that was engineering. So then I found out, I really love the way things fly and I want to understand that better as best we can. And so I moved on to, maybe I want to do aeronautical engineering, but mechanical's more general, so I landed in mechanical. And then I think it was my first or second year, I took thermodynamics, my first thermodynamics class. And I just loved that we had these laws that govern what we're able to observe and describe with equations. But there was kind of this window that we didn't really understand everything. Like thermodynamics, I feel like the further you go in it and the more you learn, the less you actually know. By the time you get to statistical thermodynamics, you're like, what's happening to my laws? And the professor was phenomenal, who taught that course to me, was a combustion scientist, and he did combustion. So I started to get interested in maybe we can apply these laws in ways that help solve problems for people. I got interested in combustion, got involved with research, which ended up being funded by the space agency. That was the microgravity research. So it all is just like building up. And then when I chose to do my PhD, eventually I thought, I would really love to be able to teach this and learn new things about it. Combustion was just so cool for that reason, that we've been using it for so long, but we knew the equations, but we couldn't necessarily solve them. There's still so much unknown, but it's so fundamentally important to us. And so when you look at all of those words together, maybe you're like, gosh, how does someone end up in that? But if you just break it up into those little steps, it kind of was this meandering path that led me to that final result. And those were my areas of research when I became a professor later on. And now I do something totally different. But that's why I ended up there, and I loved it.
I'm sure you know of the overview effect.
Mm-hmm.
And every astronaut kind of talks about that. But I think that there is a way of achieving the overview effect on Earth to people on Earth. Do you feel like the same kind of thing?
I hope so, certainly. I think that if we cannot explain the overview effect and have people feel something meaningful when they look at those photos and hear those descriptions, it would be such a shame, because it's something that everyone should experience. Like, even just talking about it, I feel like I have a reaction to it. It's just, imagine you are on a spacecraft and you look out the window and see every place you've ever been until that moment. Every person that you have ever met, with the exception of the people who you love and are extremely close with, your crew who are beside you. And to just, the things that stick out aren't things like borders or specific cities or places that you've been to or been unable to go to, but it's just like this holistic view of our home. And I think that, I hope that people can experience. I certainly do, and I've not experienced it myself, but experience when they look at Earthrise or look at pictures from the International Space Station, or recently that photo, that early gift from the Artemis program, the Artemis 1 lunar flyby. You know exactly what photo I'm talking about. I hope people take the time to really sit down and think about what that means and how beautiful that is. And we can all experience it.
One of the things I was reading was that during you're doing a free return pass of the moon, but it's a hybrid free return. So could you explain what the hybrid part of that means?
We will have some small correction burns along the way. So I guess that's the hybrid portion. So, but, you know, in the big picture, we'll spend a day orbiting the planet, testing things out, making sure they're ready, and then we do that translunar injection burn. So we come along the near side of that orbit. So it'll be about 100 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. I think maybe it's 100 miles. And then we'll do that burn, and then that'll take us out all the way around the moon and back. If we did nothing, we will hit the Earth on the way back. We just might not hit the exact landing spot we're aiming for, but it would be survivable in theory. But along the way, we will do probably 6 burns that just tighten up where we come back and hit the Earth.
It said you guys are actually going, so when you're manually piloting the spacecraft, you're going to be using the stars to do so?
Yes and no. So yes, there'll be lots of manual flying of the capsule in our mission. You know, obviously in Artemis 1, there was no crew, and everything was done remotely and through automation. So that is possible. We could do nothing the entire mission, and the ground could bring us home. But that assumes that everything works and that you have communication, and those are things that you can lose during a mission. And you want to give your crew an opportunity to do things manually if they need to save their lives. One of the things we need to test is how we do all the manual attitude control of the capsule, manual rendezvous with a lunar lander and docking. And so we will do that test with the upper stage of our rocket. So after we get off our rocket on the first day of launch, we will actually fly around it for a while and do different rendezvous approaches just to characterize how the vehicle flies, get that data, and then we'll be able to kind of put that in the training manuals of the future so crews know how they can do it manually if they need to.
Awesome.
It'll also inform simulators and scenarios that we make up in the future to train the future crews.
Speaking of simulators, so I play a lot of Kerbal Space Program. I don't know if you're aware of this game.
Yeah, I mean I played it maybe like 7 years ago or something for a little bit with my son.
Awesome. How far did you guys make it, if I can ask?
I did make it to the moon eventually, yeah.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
So you have experience. Even though you haven't been to space, you have experience.
I didn't get back from the moon though.
Hopefully this will be a different time.
No, it's actually a really fun and practical way to learn about orbital mechanics. And orbital mechanics is not intuitive. It's just you don't suddenly practice kind of having 2 spacecraft rendezvous and it's obvious how that happens in an efficient way. Orbital mechanics is special. At least it wasn't intuitive to my brain when I learned it. And so that's just I think a really fun way. And I think it has the ability to have children, youth interested in the complexities of what we're doing. We're doing some very complex orbits in the Artemis program, and you could, in theory, you could learn about them on that platform. So there's a pretty cool opportunity. I mean, we have some neat tools today to educate. The issue is not, I'd say the challenge is not the ability to do these things and to share them. The challenge is to capture the interest of people, to want to spend their energy doing something productive like that, figuring out how they might, add to our future space program.
Can you tell me about, so although you have not, you're the only crew member who has not been to space yet, but you have been, you have worked in an underwater lab. Can you tell me about that a little bit, that experience, and maybe how that's kind of prepared you for space travel?
Sure. We have historically used a program we call NEMO to help prepare astronauts for spaceflight, also to help us test processes, procedures, even equipment on Earth for space. So in that training evolution, I spent a week living on the ocean floor in an Aquarius habitat. You can kind of think of it like an RV on the ocean floor. It doesn't drive around, it's just stationary, but it's about the size of an RV. There were 6 of us in there. We lived there for a week, and you have to, go outside to go to the washroom, into the ocean. We would use it as an opportunity to simulate what it's like to be in a space station. It's very much like living in a space station. There's real risk when you're living on the ocean floor that you're mitigating all the time. If you have an emergency, you can't just leave and go to the surface. You'll get the bends, too much nitrogen in your blood. So you have all of these factors you have to consider. You have to have a strategy to deal with those risks. And then we can also use the water to simulate spacewalks. So we can, I did some testing where we were looking at the neutral buoyancy effects of the water, so we could simulate doing some work around an asteroid. I also did some Martian gravity simulations where we were looking at Mars traverse, and we were using comm delay. So Mars is so far away. The moon is 1,000 times further than the International Space Station. Mars is another 1,000 times further than that. We were using comm delay on our mission. So we had a 5-minute built-in delay. So if I called mission control, it was 5 minutes before they heard it, and then it was another 5 minutes before I got an answer back. And so we were just testing, how do we operationally manage that issue of a 5-minute time delay? And those are all the kind of cool things you can do on a mission like NEMO. It's really operational. People are really, no longer on the planet. They're in an operational environment, in a dangerous environment, and you can get a lot of really cool data. And then on top of it, it is just like the coolest life experience ever. Living under the ocean was just extraordinary to witness. I see the ocean completely differently now. It has weather patterns that are not unlike here on Earth. The current changes just like wind. The visibility changes just like it does in the atmosphere. The marine life, it's crazy. You get to know some of the marine life. They do the same thing every day. They're in the exact same place every single day. It was eye-opening for me.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Pleasure, Dean. Pleasure. Okay, guys, I just got out. I feel like I panicked during those interviews, but that's okay. That's that's how we do it. Anyways, I hope you guys thought that video was cool. There should be more. I'm looking to do more stuff like this, more vlogs and stuff like this. Obviously, this is a special occasion because I got invited to the Canadian Space Agency to talk about Artemis 2. Super cool. Thank you so much to the Canadian Space Agency. Really appreciate it. Hope you guys liked the video, and if you do, please like and subscribe for more stuff. Hopefully there'll be some more vlog videos in the future.